and Bhakti Saraswati Thakur was the seventh, so he was in the middle. And he was educated with a mixture of education, brought up in India ruled by the British, with British educational systems very common in the cities. So he got that type of education. Of course, his father also, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, got an English education. Therefore, he also got a job with the government because of that. So anyway, he was brought up with a dual education. At that time, starting at Bhakti Vinod Thakur's time, there was kind of a little bit of a confusion among the Indian population about what's to happen, because British imposed their educational system, their way of thinking, and their philosophy, etc., and religion, of course. So this influenced a lot of the intellectuals and young people, those people studying and getting an education. So nevertheless, many were also loyal to the traditions. So it was a little bit confusing, but some people tried to fuse the two things together and come up with a hybrid philosophy, a hybrid culture, mixing the Western and the Vedic culture, in which impersonal Vedanta, more or less, that is Mayavad philosophy, was kind of mixed with Western philosophy. And things like, deities and devotional service, they were not considered very intelligent. That's because we see, of course, that a lot of people are, even nowadays, are attracted to philosophy more than religion, and they think that the Advaita philosophy of Shankaracharya is very, very philosophical, etc. So they rather study that than study devotional service. It looks like, regular, let's say, religion of the people, so to speak, where people worship in the church or the synagogue or the mosque or the temple, etc., but not for real intelligent people. So it's not considered to be a high class thing. Okay, so anyway, Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself was also part of this intelligentsia, but he also did not accept this fusion of cultures. He wanted to preserve the Vedic culture. He also went through a journey of discovering Lord Chaitanya's philosophy. So before that, he was looking all over. He was reading, we can see in his early writings, he mentions all sorts of Western works, which he probably studied because in his own education, these different philosophers and persons came up, Western philosophers. So he was also searching, and eventually he found the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya, and he became very excited by that. So this was a counter to the impersonal interpretation of Vedanta. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he was in Puri working for the government, got inspired by Jagannath himself. So the Jagannath told Bhaktivinoda Thakur that you're not here. I didn't bring you to Puri for legal matters, because he was a magistrate, but to establish the Vaishnava Sidhanta. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of course, was pleased with that. But he said, also, I need some assistance. I cannot do this on my own. And so Jagannath then told Bhaktivinoda Thakur to pray to the goddess Bimala Devi, who's in the Jagannath temple. And as a result of that, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born, and he was called Bimala Prasad, the mercy of Bimala Devi deity. So very fortunate that He also was intelligent and also was devotionally inclined. So he had memorized the whole Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit when he was 9 years old. He was very intelligent, very moralistic, and photographic memory, and he introduced him to japa, etc. So he had a very fortunate childhood of having a Vaishnava background. Um, and he got his modern education among the, say, upper class in Bengal, and he studied these Western subjects like mathematics, etc. He also studied Sanskrit, so good, but that was extracurricular. So he excelled actually in mathematics and Jyotish or astronomy. So he was quite proficient at that. And because of his proficiency, he also got the name Sidhanta Saraswati at that time. This is not an initiation name. This is the title he got for his material learning. As a child, of course, in his high school years, so to speak, he was very fond of debating. And he would have these debates with his schoolmates, etc. And he was very clever at defeating different persons' arguments, just as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his childhood also was expert at debating. So he entered Sanskrit college, which was, let's say, more traditional in its learning leanings. And he studied, of course, Indian philosophy, ancient history, etc. Of course, this is all influenced by British ideas, British idea about what is the history of India, etc. What is the philosophy? So, and largely influenced, again, the philosophy, largely influenced by Mayavad philosophy. So he gave up his studies after that. He wasn't so much interested. Okay. He did some various jobs in various places, working for various royal families, etc., in their libraries and stuff like that. And he finally took initiation in 1901, which is like 123 years ago, from Gaurishwardas Babaji, and got the name Varshabhanavi Devi Dayita, which means maid servant of Radharani and Krishna. So he was disgusted more or less even with his material job after he got out of, quit college, and then he got his job. He also became very disinterested in that because he was, let's say, inclined to Lord Chaitanya's philosophy and to preaching, etc. And he settled in Mayapur finally, near the place where Lord Chaitanya was born, actually. And of course, at that time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also discovered the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at the Yog Pit. And later on, he actually started to develop a temple there. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur stayed at that place. So he was, this is, in the early 1900s. And he became very proficient in the Vaishnava and Gaudiya philosophy particularly. And as I said, there was this conflict between Western ideas and traditional Indian values. There was also a conflict between the Gaudiya Vaishnavas and other traditionalists like Smartas. So that was also quite strong. So there was a conference in 1911 in which the great Vaishnavas from Vrindavan area and Bengal gathered together, along with certain Brahmanas, Smarta Brahmanas. And the debate was, or let's say the discussion was on who is qualified as a Brahmana and who is qualified uh, as a Vaishnava and who is qualified to worship the Shalagram Shila. So, of course, the strict Brahmanas said, well, you should be a Brahmana to worship the Shalagram Shila. The Vaishnava Sidhanta, like Pancharatra, will say that it doesn't matter whether you're Brahmana, Vaishya, Sudra. If you're initiated as a Vaishnava, you are allowed to worship the Shalagram Shila. This is not just Lord Chaitanya's philosophy. This is Pancharatra philosophy. On the other hand, we will say that actually you should not worship Vishnu properly, even if you are a Brahmana, unless you're also initiated as a Vaishnava. So that's the Pancharatric stand. The Brahmanas will say it doesn't matter, we don't care about Vaishnava initiation. You're not a Brahmana, qualified for all types of worship, finished. And if you're not a Brahmana, you're not qualified as a Brahmana, you shouldn't worship the deity, even if you are a Vaishnava. So that was basically the idea. So therefore, they were putting down the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, particularly because we emphasize this point. In the other sampradayas, like Madhva and Ramanuja Sampradaya, basically, they do support the Brahman lineages for deity worship, etc., like that. But in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, less so. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was sent there by his father because Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not feeling well at that time, I think, or he was busy. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur spoke very nicely. Out of that, we have one book called Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. I think it's been translated by Bhumipati or someone, in which he gives arguments to show who is the real Brahmana, not just by birth, but by qualification, etc., and who is a Vaishnava and who is superior, etc. So we covered all these topics, and the general public supported the conclusions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. However, it created a big problem with the Brahmanas of Navadvip, and after that point, there was this friction between Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and the Brahmins of Navadvip. Okay, so at this time also, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur established a printing press in Calcutta and to print all these books like Chaitanya Charitamrita. At this time, a lot of the books were gradually being lost because they were in old manuscript form on palm leaves. Some of the works, perhaps the famous works, may have been printed by the British or whatever, but not many. They were not so much interested in the Gaudiya works. So the Gaudiya works basically were gradually disappearing because of lack of interest. So there were a few traditional families or wealthy people that had copies. Libraries had copies, like the Puri Library of the King, that had some, a lot of Vaishnava scriptures in manuscript form. Apparently, the Balade's commentary on the Brahma Sutras was there in the Puri Library, but nobody else had a copy of it. They couldn't find it anywhere. So eventually, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he bribed one of the librarians there in the King's Library to make him a copy of it. That's how he got the copy. So anyway, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was looking for a copy, and he asked people. People said, "I've heard about the book. Yes, very nice, whatever, like that." But very few people had read it at that time. Finally, he found some copies of it, but again, they were all a little bit, different copies. People copied by hand, so the mistakes. So there was no critical edition or anything, and it wasn't available for people in general. So therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he got this printing press, and then he wanted to print all these books so they become available for people in general, and of course for the devotees. So it was a very important contribution. And we see that a lot of the works that we have now are there because they were preserved by the printing, the effort to print all these books. Okay, so anyway, the printing went on, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur moved the press from Calcutta to Krishnanagar, and he eventually published Chaitanya Charitamrita, and they had established some sort of news pamphlet, Sajantoshini, that continued. And at a certain point, Bhakti Saraswati Thakur took sannyas, which is unusual because there was no tradition of sannyas in the Gaudiya Sampradaya after Lord Chaitanya. And of course, there were 10 sannyasis around Lord Chaitanya and Puri, but they actually didn't take sannyas. They were sannyasis already from other groups, and they joined Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya, of course, took sannyas. But after Lord Chaitanya, then we don't see people taking sannyas in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. The equivalent, of course, is the Babaji, but he doesn't have orange cloth, doesn't have a danda, except that he has no markings of a person in the Varnashram system. So the sannyasi, of course, is in the Varnashram system in the highest rung, but he has particular marks to make him distinguished within the Varnashram system. So anyway, it was not currently there, but then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur introduced that into our sampradaya by taking sannyas, following after the Vaishnavas of South India, like the Ramanuja Sampradaya. Why? For preaching, just as Lord Chaitanya didn't actually have to take sannyas, but he took sannyas, gave up his family in order to set an example for preaching, and therefore you would have a greater authority. So similarly, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur thought that we should have some sort of formalized system of renunciation, and this would help the preaching effort. So therefore, in 1918, he took sannyas. Okay, and at Uttadanga Junction, he establishes Calcutta Bhaktivinoda Asana, which was called the Sri Gaudiya Math. This, of course, is where Prabhupada met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur as well. And of course, the good fortune is that ISKCON Calcutta has purchased the place now, so it is part of ISKCON also. So a very nice event. So the place is now preserved. So that became the inspiration for establishing Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's different temples around India. So 64 temples in India and 3 abroad. And he tried in London. He sent the sannyasi to England and Germany and Rangoon and Burma. Yeah. So within a short period of time, actually, like let's say from 2000, 1910 onwards to 20 and 30, within that period of 20 or 30 years, the movement actually grew phenomenally from nothing at a time when India was going through all sorts of social changes. Of course, there was all these conflicts going on between Western culture and Indian culture, and then there was a conflict between the Brahmanas and the Gaudiyas. There was also the conflict with the British, and the whole nationalistic movement was there. This, of course, was going on when Srila Prabhupada was a youth, that they were saying we should be independent of Britain, etc. So this was also going on at the same time, increasing all the time. But in spite of that, we find that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur managed to, within these few years, to get a huge following so that you could establish 64 centers around India. at that time, which means you actually have to get support of money also. So there were people willing to support that. And then you had to have devotees to man those places. And he found those devotees also. So it's quite remarkable that in those conditions, that from nothing they could develop. Okay. And of course, the preaching went on in the form of publications and, of course, their newspapers, etc. They're enthusiastically expanding in all places like this. So very, very dynamic preacher. And we can say innovative. He innovated it, like with the printing press, introducing the printing press and printing all the Gaudiya works. That was a great innovation. He, of course, took sannyasa innovation within our sampradaya, and he organized this Vaishnava movement, which was not previously there. We see that the Gaudiyas in general had different groups, but there was no formal organization, and a lot of it was based upon family lines. So we have caste Goswamis, usually from Brahmin lines, having a temple or whatever and giving initiation, etc. And they're all separate. They're not united in any way. And therefore, the learning was passed on simply through different lines of Gaudiyas, mainly by heredity. No big organization independent of hereditary lines to carry on and to develop preaching. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur had understood the necessity of preaching because he saw that the movement was also dead when he was there and the scriptures were disappearing. Bhakti-Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur then took up the mission of very, very enthusiastically preaching. And the result was that he got a great following. He was very bold to counteract all the Mayavad impersonal philosophies in all cases. And though we know that among the intellectuals, the Mayavad was more popular, nevertheless, he did succeed in establishing the Vaishnava, particularly the Gaudiya philosophy. So he was against the Advaita philosophy. He was also against the Smarta ideas and the idea of the Brahmana by birth, etc., and the privileged position of the Brahmana. So therefore, he got a lot of hostility from that. He was also against the different offshoots, that is the Apasampradayas or Gaudiyas, like the owls and the bowls and whatever, Garanga Nagaris, etc. So many different philosophies began to evolve, different groups, not organized groups, but the groups were there with different ideas. So then he wanted to establish the original philosophy of Lord Chaitanya. Another point is that he understood that the preaching had to be adapted to the modern world, and we could use the modern or the present day facilities for the preaching effort. Thus, he got the printing press and started these weekly or monthly and daily editions of news, etc. He utilized trains, cars, whatever, whatever was available in terms of communications and facilities for printing, building, etc. He used all those things. He didn't. It's just everything had to be, Vedic or whatever like that. Print your scriptures on public manuscripts or whatever, or walk instead of going by vehicle. He was quite modern in that respect. He would say, okay, we can use these things for the preaching effort. So in this way, he was kind of original. So here we see him in a car. So traditionalists would criticize and say, hey, this is a modern invention. It's a British thing. How can you contaminate yourself by doing this? You should actually, never enter into a Western vehicle or whatever like that. Go by foot. But he was more interested in using things for preaching work. We find the same thing, of course, after that. Srila Prabhupada also utilized printing press, tape recorders, dictaphone machines, or whatever he could use. He got on a ship to go to America, even like in 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was controversial for a Madhva sannyasi to leave India because you have to get on a ship or a plane or something and go over the ocean. And you shouldn't go over the ocean because scripture says you shouldn't go over the ocean. So, even in the modern days, some people are very conservative. You can't use these modern inventions, etc. But in our line, taking the hint from Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada also adopted different modern inventions for the purpose of preaching. He also found out or recognized that you have to get influential contacts. So therefore, he also cultivated relationships with the government, even though, of course, it was a British government. He cultivated some relationship with the governor of Bengal, etc., and brought him to Mayapur even in 1935. So in this way, he got some recognition from the government itself. And we see that with Prabhupada also. He would interview or talk with, leaders of society in different places. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also was interested in preaching abroad, not just confining himself to India, since Lord Chaitanya has said the movement should spread all over the world, the whole world, not just India. And he sent out people to London and Germany and Burma. So he was interested in, spreading the mission to other countries as well. So he made this statement in 1936, I have a prediction, however long, maybe in the future, one of my disciples will cross the ocean and bring back the entire world. So this is very prophetic. Also, in 1936, he gave this order to our Srila Prabhupada, I'm fully confident that you can explain in English the thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with the language of other members. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. I hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher. So very, very encouraging to Srila Prabhupada to preach in the English language. And he disappeared in 1937 at the age of 63, which is quite young for our present day idea. But of course, we also have to understand that at that time, there were many diseases going around or whatever. So therefore, at that time, he disappeared. But his legacy is carried on. There is, of course, a little bit of misfortune, and that is that after his demise, they continued for about 10 years, under one brahmachari. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told them to govern by a board of people, like a governing body commission, a GBC. They didn't do that, and they just kept one person as the head of brahmachari. But then he actually left the place, and then the whole movement split. All the different sannyasis took possession of the different ashramas in the different places, or they aligned themselves under several of the sannyasis. So you had several groups there. But basically, it was not one movement anymore. So that's in the 1937. After that, 47, Then after that is split. Began to split up, 1947, which is like after the war, after the Second World War. And this, of course, is when Prabhupada was renouncing, etc. And, in the 1950s and 60s, then Prabhupada in 67 or whatever, then he 65, is it? He went off to America, whatever. So as the Gaudiya Mat began to fall apart, Prabhupada began to renounce his grihastha life, take vanaprastha, then take sannyas, do his writing, etc. But then he found that these mutts were all separate. They were not emphasizing the preaching so much, just maintaining their own little temple. And they were not encouraging him also in preaching work. We see in the Lilamrita, there's descriptions of how he was very ambitious to do preaching work and print things, but the mutts were not interested in doing this. They were not very ambitious at all. So he was very discouraged with that. But he took his inspiration from the words of Bhakti Saraswati Thakur when he first met at the Ultadanga Junction place. Bhakti Saraswati Thakur was introduced to him, and he told him, "You preach to the English-speaking public." And then later on, we see at just before he passed away, he also was encouraging him in that direction to preach to the English-speaking public. So Srila Prabhupada took that as his life-giving medicine, inspired by the statement of Vishnu Chakravarti, a commentary on Vyavasayika Buddhi, his commentary on the Gita, which talks about fixed intelligence, undivided intelligence. So in that purport, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur speaks about how you take the order of Guru with fixed mind, fixed intelligence, and you regard that as the medicine that maintains your life. If you don't take the medicine, you die. So therefore, you take the order of Guru as the instruction to keep your spiritual life alive. So he got this instruction, you preach to the English-speaking public. So therefore, we see this great determination. When Srila Prabhupada was in India and he had taken sannyas, they had no money, and he was living in Radha Damodar Temple. Then he began writing Bhakti Gaudiya magazine, and then Bhagavatam. No money, anything, no support, but he was very determined to write in English and get the work printed. So he did all of that because he wanted to follow the order of spiritual master. In spite of that, again, no much support in India. So then he thought, let us go abroad and preach to the English-speaking public in America. So again, following the order of his guru. So when he got to America, he said, well, I don't know why I'm really here. I don't know anybody, whatever, but I'm just trying to do the will of Krishna, follow the order of my guru. So whatever you want with me, Krishna, you do. But again, following the order of a spiritual master, he had a very strong conviction in that. So we see this enthusiasm to preach was there in Bhaktivinoda Thakur and in Bhakti Saraswati Thakur, also imbibed into Srila Prabhupada. So we should maybe take that as our message, to be enthusiastic to preach. And of course, to preach, we need knowledge. So we see that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhakti Saraswati Thakur, and our Srila Prabhupada, they always wanted to print books with the hope that the devotees would read them and other people would read them. So in other words, knowledge is an important factor here in the preaching. So we should have that knowledge also. Grounded in that knowledge, then we can preach nicely to other persons. The other fact, of course, is, as I said, that our Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhakti Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada also took advantage of the situation at that time, and they utilized what they could for the preaching movement. So therefore, we get the printing of books, we get the printing press, inventions used, transport, etc. Everything useful for developing Krishna consciousness. So in the modern world also, we take advantage of whatever facilities there are in order to preach. So fortunately or unfortunately, in the modern world, the world keeps changing too fast. Too many inventions, too many modern things, too many innovations in transport, in communications, and whatever. to the extent that even publishing books is maybe outdated completely in another 10 years. No more book publications. Who knows what's going to happen? Everything is digital. So the trend is going in that direction. So the Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati struggled to print all the books. That struggle is no longer there. You don't need a printing press. You can do it all digitally with very minimal cost. So things change very quickly. And of course, that may change also in a few years. You don't even have digital things. It's all like audio things or something. Who knows what it's going to be? So in this way, things keep changing. And the devotees can take advantage of that. Of course, everything has its plus and minus points, but we take advantage of whatever is there in order to communicate the basic message and transmit the knowledge that we have to other persons. So in this way, we can please our parampara of that includes Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Saraswati Thakur, and Srila Prabhupada. Okay, any question there?
Hare Krishna Mata, thank you very much for wonderful class on Bhakti Siddhanta. Can you speak on the general Namaharta or the dynamic preaching of Bhakti Siddhanta and also the deity worship on the university or the college youth preaching?
Yeah. Well, the Namahat we find was something that Bhaktivinoda Thakur introduced. He speaks about that in several of his works. He wrote a little pamphlet on the Namahat also, very interesting pamphlet. Basically, a hut is a hatta is a marketplace. We see in Bengal, if you go out of Mayapur, sometimes on the roads coming from Calcutta, there'll be big block of traffic. It's all blocked up. Why? Because there's a market going on. All the farmers have come with their subsies, and they're all there on the road selling all their vegetables like cabbage and whatever. Of course, in ancient times, they didn't have highways like that, but they had the marketplace. So taking that analogy, the comparison of a marketplace, where people gather together and sell things, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says we should distribute the holy name as in a marketplace. But the thing is, you do not charge people for the name. You charge for other goods, you sell them. Holy name is for free. Of course, we go to the marketplace because everybody's gathered there, but we don't want to charge anybody. We want to give out something free. So we're giving up the holy name for free to people in the marketplace. People come to get some valuable things. So we announce, you take the holy name, it's the most valuable thing, it is free. So in other words, the Namahata means that we are interested in preaching, and we want to go where there are interested people, and then we can, preach and make them into devotees. So that was his initial concept of, gathering people together and preaching. But then he thought of how to cultivate these people. So then he thought of making informal groups. So he actually did this. He began to establish different groups of people who were interested, so they would meet at a certain place, maybe in a house or in a temple or something like that. And every week or something, periodically, they would come together. They would discuss and have kirtan, etc., and have sangha. So this is the beginning of what we know as the Namahat movement. So Chapanaka Maharaj got his inspiration from that, and therefore he made a more formal type of organization for us in ISKCON, where we do preaching in small groups, not necessarily with deities or anything, no temple, no property or anything, but at least people get together as a group, and then they began to discuss about Krishna and have kirtans. So that, of course, is a natural thing to do, but not really organized properly. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur inspired people to do this. It was a little bit of small scale, but then ISKCON has become kind of a large-scale thing. And it's quite effective also. So this is one way in which we can preach. As we know, the main process for our spiritual advancement and our main preaching is Nam Sankirtan. This is the Yuga Dharma. This is what Lord Chaitanya has taught, Harinama Eva Kevalam. So, but we do have the establishment of temples. This was, of course, brought into prominence by Bhakti Sidhanta Saraswati Thakur when he established his matas. So then each mata would have deities, and they would establish deity worship, etc. Of course, before that, there were temples, obviously, even going back to the Goswamis in Vrindavan. And then there were temples carried on by the descendants from that and from the initial persons who were initiated by Nityananda or Janava and Advaita Acharya. The Goswami lines, they had temples also. So there were temples as well. These acted as the only places for people to gather and discuss and have kirtans, the major places at least, because they didn't have organizations, etc. So there were these temples where they could gather and discuss, etc. But there were also not that many temples. Certain temples were there, and they didn't really increase over time. So when Bhakti Sidhanta Saraswati Thakur established his organization and they began to grow and establish places, he also established these temples, permanent places. So going beyond the Namhat, which was, we could say, temporary places, he established temples, permanent places, where in different cities where the movement could begin to expand also. And of course, from these main temples, then you could expand into different Namhadas, etc., like that. So then the temples became quite a prominent feature of his movement. And again, we find Srila Prabhupada also did the same thing, that the movement was, at that time, in the beginning of the movement, largely based upon making temples. Since that time, we see that then the emphasis shifted more to the congregation, and the Namahat began to grow. But in the beginning, again, temples opened up around the world. They got deities, established different deities in different places around the world. So that was an initial effort for Srila Prabhupada also. So that's where the deities come from. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur emphasized that a lot in his opening up of temples.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Amritanand, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisance for all Krishna Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us, Maharaj. My question is twofold. One is, in our sampradaya, when we get initiated, we get a name, a spiritual name. And that's what is the practice, that everyone addresses you by a spiritual name, even in our Guru Parampara. But then we have Bhakti Sidhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj. The only time we refer to his spiritual name, his initiated name, is during Vyas Puja offerings, when we do the Pushpanjali. So why is that anomaly, Maharaj?
Well, actually, the name is part of initiation or Diksha. But if we look at our history from Lord Chaitanya's time, we find that Lord Chaitanya got initiation. He didn't get a name. But he got mantra. He got a 10-syllable Krishna mantra from in Gaya. And if we look at the history of Nityananda Prabhu, mentioned in the Chaitanya Mangala, Lochan Das Thakur, Nityananda got initiation, same 10-syllable Krishna mantra, no name. He didn't get the name Nityananda at that time. And we see others as well even Vishwanath Chakravarti later on, several hundred years later, he very rarely uses a Diksha name. Sometimes in his works he uses the word Hari Vallabha, but whether that was his Diksha name or not, we don't know. So many of the original persons of Lord Chaitanya's movement really didn't have Diksha names. They had the mantra, which is the most important element, which we get at second initiation. So the name was not so much emphasized there. In this way, it can be done. It's a pancharatric process. There's what we call pancha samskar is there, where you get a name, mantra, tilak, deity worship, and branding on the body with shankha and chakra. So that's called pancha samskar. So that's the pancharatric rite. So we can say that getting the name like Krishna Das or Chaitanya Das is part of the Diksha ceremony. But the most important part is getting the mantra, because if you don't get the mantra, you can't worship the deity. And the most important part of Pancharatra is to be qualified to worship the deity. So you need the mantra for that. So therefore, the mantra is the most important thing. The Gaudiyas, of course, take this Pancharatric Vaishnava initiation, but they emphasize mainly the mantra. And they didn't really they seem to have neglected the name. They didn't really consider the name so important. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda, and others, Srinivasacharya didn't get a name, Bharatam didn't get a name as such, or these women don't see it advertised anywhere. So in that sense, the more emphasis on the Diksha is getting a mantra, not the name. So why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur didn't use his Diksha name? One reason probably is he was already more prominent. He got very prominent by the Sidhanta Saraswati name. So probably maybe for that reason he discontinued with that. Another thing is, of course, is that traditionally, if you take sannyas, then again you change your name. So maybe we're taking his we're taking that as his sannyas name, not his diksha name. So maybe he adopted that as his sannyas name rather than his diksha name as a brahmachari. I don't really know why it's not popular, but that could be one reason also.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Interesting point, however.
Thank you, Maharaj, for clearing that up. Maharaj, my follow-up question is related to DT Seva. Now, we do, when we are offering different articles to the DT, now there is a significance behind that as we learn, why you ring a bell, why you're offering incense, why. So when we understand the why, it becomes more meaningful rather than just mechanical. So I don't have an answer that suppose if we are offering Aratik to the DT, there's a certain sequence. We start at the feet 4 times, then get to the navel, then to the head, and then all around the body 7 times. Why these specific numbers, Maharaj? What's the meaning behind that?
Well, interesting question. We like to standardize everything, especially because we do a deity worship ministry and we don't want people concocting things, etc. So we like to standardize everything. If we look in the scriptures, even the arti itself is not very standardized. So the arti that we do is more or less, it's not even the arti they do at, let's say, traditional temples like Radharaman Temple or Govinda Temple in Jaipur, which are very traditional Gaudiya temples. You look at their arti, it's quite different from our arti. So our art with the incense and the lamps and the conch water and the cloth and the flower and then chamaram, fan, etc. This seems more to be a tradition in Bengal, that particular order for the arti, the particular items, which can have a scriptural basis. There's something called the 5 elements of worship, which should include most of these things. But it seems to be more of a tradition in Bengal to use those particular items like the cloth, etc. The idea of arti itself, of course, has its basis maybe in the lamps. Huh? So we see like in Hari Bhakti Vilas, it doesn't talk about an arti, they just say wave the lamps, finished. And not the whole process that we do. Or there's a description of doing an arti by circling the conch shell 3 times over the deity's head with water in it. So we get those 2 elements in Hari Bhakti Vilas only as part of a formal arti. The basic idea behind the arti is that it's a type of seva, indirect in one sense. Obviously, it has elements of offering things to the Supreme Lord or Guru, etc. The other element is to purify the person, which, of course, Krishna doesn't have to be purified, or whatever. But traditionally, when a person comes to you, or you come to a person, then you offer some sort of purification, as we see when Krishna comes home from the fields. Then he's been out in the fields, and he's got the dust on his body and whatever. He's been out there. We don't know who he met or whatever. So when he comes back, they may do a purification rite by circling different items around him, like a dristi, etc. Probably familiar with dristis? They offer like put kumkum in water or something like that, and they circle it with that to remove all the negative elements that you may have attracted by wandering outside, whatever, or evil eye or whatever like that. So that seems to be the origin of all this. So you use lamps because fire is nice and bright and whatever, takes away negative energy. You use incense, fragrance, etc. Very good. Flowers, nice, whatever. So all these items seem to be of that nature to ward off or prevent, purify a person of evil influences. Of course, as I said, deity doesn't get any evil influences anyway, but we're doing this as a service, like as a traditional welcome of a person. Krishna doesn't have to eat even because we want to feed him. He doesn't have any hunger anyway, but we feed him. So in the same way, we just like to offer a service of he's coming there, and we want to try to help keep his purity, whatever. So we offer the arti, etc. So that's you can say the more origins of it as such. So basically, we take it as a welcome of the Supreme Lord by offering these different items. So that's why the circular element is there. To purify your aura, so to speak, if you want to speak in terms of auras. As for the numbers, that's also not really fixed. In some, like in Hari Bhakti Vilas, doesn't really get into it at all. So 3 times around the head or a conch shell, that's all. Even the lamps, it doesn't say specific numbers. If we look in a few Pancharatrik scriptures, we'll find lamps, 4 for the feet, 2 for the navel, 1 for the head, or 3 for the head, like this, or 7 times around. So various places say various things for lamps, numbers, not saying why also. So anyway, there's these type of different things, but not fixed numbers as such. And especially for the other items, which actually are less commonly mentioned as arti items, there's no real figures given. So only thing is for lamps and conch shell with water 3 times. So therefore, it's more or less arbitrary how much we want to offer these items. But as I said, we want standardization. Therefore, in ISKCON, we've standardized these things in a certain way.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
There is a tantric interpretation of these things. I think you look in John Woodworth's book. I think it's quoting from some different things, giving symbolic significance to offering different things like chamara or ether, and maybe the fragrance is earth, because fragrance and earth go to Ganda, and earth element is there, whatever like that. So in Tantra, they do associate the different items of arti, and not just arti, but other things as well, with elements like that. But that's, as I said, from Tantra, Shaiva Tantra, or whatever, I don't know, some Tantra.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Oh, I didn't confuse you more.
No, Maharaj, it is. Yeah, the understanding when we started doing deity worship, Maharaj, is that, at least when we do this, we are treating Krishna as a person. Like when we bathe him, so it develops it develops a personal connection with him, and you don't take it to be stone or a statue or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the basic idea is a type of welcome in one sense.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay. That's it.
Bhakti, you want to say something?
Has his hand up. I think he finished.
Hare Krishna.
Good.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Maharaj. We have some more time. Would you please kindly mention the primary or the foremost teachings of that we can absorb and on a day-to-day life that will help us to progress in bhakti, that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, the foremost teachings that we can absorb in our day-to-day life that help us.
Oh, well, of course we have to have, we can say, this philosophical or theological basis quite clear. That also is not too difficult. Fortunately, our philosophy is not so complicated and technical like Advaitavad, Mayavad philosophy. Quite simple. Which, of course, it means simplified nicely by Bhaktivinoda Thakur into Dasmula. If you're familiar with that, 10 elements, So that, if we can get that straight, at least, that's the basis for our preaching. And for our own, of course, it's not just preaching, it's for our own, it's necessary to have a clear idea of what's what in order to worship properly. In other words, we have to know worshiping God. Who is God? Why is he God? What's his position? And who am I? We do have to have that very clear. So the Dasmula helps us to get that clear in our own worship as well as in preaching to others. So, and then of course, that whole idea of personal versus impersonal again. So therefore we have introduced the idea of Shaktis. The Lord has Shaktis by which he manifests his form, qualities, activities, and then we can establish a relationship with him, and therefore we get the idea of Rasa. It's another point of Dasmula. And then we have to take the whole process of Abhideya, we use Bhakti, and we have our different angas of Bhakti, some of which are more important than others, and then we have to do that. So with that philosophical basis, then we carry out activities in our life. In our life, we do sadhana bhakti. So we do have to have clear definition of what is sadhana bhakti. By sadhana bhakti, we mean uttama bhakti or pure bhakti sadhana. So then we have to have that definition, which we get from Nectar of Devotion very clearly, and which is quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita and other works. On the Abhinasha Shunya, that whole definition we have to get. And Kriti Sadhya, to engage the senses in order to attain bhava. So we have to have our definition of what we're doing properly. Once we get that, then we have to execute that in our life. So we have the different angas of bhakti, etc. We have the elements, Nam Sankirtan, worshiping deity, association with devotees, hearing, etc. All these elements are there. So the devotee in his practical life then has to engage his different senses in these authorized processes. The only difficulty may be in which ones to emphasize the most. So obviously, we do have the 5 important elements mentioned in Nectar Devotion. So then we do that. And of the most important is Nam Sankirtan. So we have to chant the holy name. That's the most important. And along with that, then we carry out our other daily activities. But at least as far as our spiritual life is concerned, we have to focus on these 5 activities, or at least 4 or 3 or whatever we can do, and ultimately 1, chanting the holy name, along with the knowledge. And the other activities we do, family and body and social life and whatever, should not contradict that. So that's our basic principle. So we set a standard for ourselves in terms of our devotional service, how we're going to engage, a certain standard, a certain amount of chanting, a certain amount of reading or whatever. We establish some sort of standard, regularity for that. And then we set a standard for our conduct in terms of our work and whatever else we're doing in the material world. And we try to balance out these things. So not necessary to think that I have to renounce everything and just do bhakti. No. Lord Chaitanya's example is not his example of his followers is there, that he didn't actually encourage everybody to renounce. Rather the opposite. Everybody stayed as they were, as grihastas, and they stayed in Bengal, and they did their jobs, and for 4 months of the year they came and they associated with Lord Chaitanya, and then they went back and carried on as usual, but at the same time doing their particular devotional service. So it's a matter of getting the knowledge, applying the knowledge, at the same time, keeping it standard or regularizing it and making it up to a certain level, with the devotional aspect there, and at the same time supporting ourselves and do our job and whatever else we have to do. We balance them out very nicely.
Thank you, Maharaj. May I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think some texts and some scriptures reveals or mention that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was also a Manjari. And anything that could you clarify that?
I don't know whether I haven't researched much detail on his identity and all that, whatever. Possibly others may have more details on that. But the tendency within our sampradaya has been this Manjari Bhava, following after Rupa Goswami and the other Goswamis, who are basically identified as Manjaris. So that's been a very prominent feature, and it's also carried on in the various Raganuga branches, among the Babajis and others, Goswamis and others who practice. Basically, they impart Manjari identity to their followers. That's all stems back from, I don't know, hundreds of years went back. So that's kind of been the basis of the Manjari identity or whatever. The same for Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they also identify him as such. On what basis, I don't know, but basically on I see it mentioned or whatever. But how it all started, I really don't know. Personally, I don't think he probably personally revealed it, so it's more or less inference probably from other things, but I can't say definitely.
Okay. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for your time, and very excellent.
One point of course is that the Manjari Bhava is the prominent thing because they're so to follow, Rupa Goswami, etc. But that does not exclude that other things could happen. Everything is possible by the remarkable Shakti of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna, etc. So we do find within Lord Chaitanya's Sampradaya, there was actually Sakya Bhava also. And Ananda, he wrote a whole book on Raganuga and Sakya Rasa, cowherd boy rasa, which is not even a Saki, not even a Gopi, not even Madhurya Bhava, but it was Sakya Rasa. So he wrote a book on that, and he did have some followers at one time. It's kind of died out, I think, but there was a group practicing Sakya Bhava also within our Sampradaya. So nothing is impossible.
Okay. Not just only the Dasya Bhav, but also Sakya Bhav is also there.
Yeah. I don't see any Vatsalya. Vatsalya, of course, is the prominent one in the Vallabha Sampradaya.
Yeah.
Which is also Raganuga. But I've heard, somebody told me that they do have Madhurya Bhav also, but it's probably not Manjari Bhav, it's probably Gopi Bhav, Sakhi Bhav, probably.
Right.
So things are possible. All things are possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for your valuable time and wonderful class for all of us to open our eyes to understand more about Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. Also, we have our temple president, Madhuri Prabhu, is also there. Roji, are you able to say some few words?
Mr. Roj, can I ask one question if time permits? Or
Yeah.
Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to you, all glories Prabhupada. Maharaj, just I have one question related to Namahatta. So do we have any standard like for Namahatta? We see like some Namahatta start from like the Gaura Arti, Prabhupada Arti, is some direct start the preaching, just normal like Jai Radha Madhav. So do we have any standard for that, or the both is like the
That's flexible. We do have our congregational ministry that probably give you suggestions on how to establish these different groups and what you're going to call them, Bhakti Brikshas or Navadras or whatever. So no, there's no definite standard. It's up to the discretion of the local leaders, how they think is most effective for engaging everybody and, having, of course, how long it's going to be the meeting or whatever and whatever. So it's all up to the local leaders how they want to organize the particular meeting of what happens first, what happens second, what happens third, etc. It's very flexible. Ultimately, of course, the main idea is to keep people engaged, give them some good information and good inspiration for hearing and chanting. So whatever works is good.
Okay, thank you so much, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Also, there is a question on the chat, Maharaj.
Yes. What's that?
Good. You can read it, Srila.
Radha Madaji is asking, Maharaj, what is Bhakti Siddhanta's spiritual service in Goloka? We know Kamala Manjari, his father's service is to offer comfort to Srimati Radharani.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, these things are kind of speculative, I think, because they may not have identified completely. Probably Bhaktivinoda Thakur in some of his poems may identify his service, like that in some of his poetry. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, I don't know if he's done that or not. I'm not sure, but I haven't read it personally. I did a translation of his authorized biography, which he wrote corrections on in his hand. I got it from the Bhaktivinoda Research Center. They told me to translate, so I did it. So, but in there, we don't see, I don't think, any details about his particular service in Goloka, etc. So he himself probably didn't personally directly say anything about that. So we don't really know.
Okay, thank you. Madhumati Prabhuji, would you like to say a few words?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for
Sorry.
joining in and enlivening us for this wonderful class on Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. This week we like to especially remember more of his teachings and instructions and his pastimes. So thank you very much for enlightening us.
Very well. God.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very well.
Maharaj, Prabhuji is our temple president and so nicely guiding us all of us. Thank you so much.
Okay. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Where's the center?
It's kind of Central New Jersey, Maharaj. So it's in Plainfield, New Jersey.
New Jersey. I don't know
Yeah.
America. I don't even know where New Jersey is. Something on the East Coast, I know.
Yes, Maharaj.
What's the biggest city? What's the biggest city near?
Close to New York.
New York.
Yeah.
Near New York. Near New York. Okay, fine. Okay.
From 1 hour, 1 hour
You
from New
have been to New Jersey, Maharaj, many years back. You have been to
I-
Tawaka Temple in New Jersey.
Yeah, I went there once. Oh, that was New Jersey, Tawaka.
Yes. Tawaka is
Oh,
also
okay.
in New Jersey.
I went there for 2 days, I think. Ram Navami.
Yeah. I've heard lectures from you in Tawaka.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah, I was there.
No, but your center here is Tawaka or near there?
our center is Plainfield, New Jersey. So from Tobacco, it's like 45 miles away. 40, close to 40 miles away.
Attending
Okay.
the
Not so far away. Okay. So not so far away. So.
Yeah. Yeah, not too far.
Prabhu used to be temple president even for tobacco at some point for a few years.
Yeah.
Also, Prabhuji is our zonal supervisor for the GBC here of America.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Supervising how many areas? How many temples?
Right now it is 5.
5. Okay. All New Jersey or New Jersey and somewhere else?
No, New Jersey, then Gitanagari.
Oh, also. Also. Okay.
Gitanagari, and there's a regional secretary in Boston and Connecticut, but I'm just also met.
Okay, fine. Okay, great. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Okay, Haribol.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, Haribol.
Haribol, Dandot Pranam, Maharaj.
Haribol.
Just to his Bhanu Swami Maharaj ki
Maharaj
jai.
ki
Jai.
Vanchakalapatarubhyascha
Vasandudev
Patitanam
Jagatitanam
Pavanebhyo
Pavanebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo Namo
Vaishnavebhyo
Namaha.
Vaishnavi Namo Namaha.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
Maharaj.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you all, dear devotees.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna, Haribo.
We'll be continuing this tomorrow. We'll announce the speaker. We are still confirming. Hopefully, His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. But still, we are still confirming with Maharaj.
Maharaj is not available. So
Not available.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Okay, so we'll announce the speaker.
Yeah, but Wednesday is confirmed.
Okay.
It's Sundar Gopal Prabhu.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Please take this opportunity to attend every day and to hear the nectar from these exalted devotees. This way we can also purify and take at least some extent in our life. That's what is we should always seek the mercy of the devotees. Teachings and lessons is also another way of association with exalted devotees. So thank you so much, and I will conclude here. Vancha kalpatarupasya Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Vaishnavanda ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Sidhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Goswami Maharaj Avirvav Mahabahautsava ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Nanda Kodi Vaishnavanda ki Jai. Gaura Premanande.
Thank you, Hare
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Haribo.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.